When I stepped off the bus and saw the iron gate of 421 Booker Lane rusted shut, I knew something was wrong. The house, my grandfather's house, stood beyond it, still proud in the morning light, but the new sign nailed to the gate read, "Private Property, Managed by Pine Valley HOA." I wrapped my fingers around the bars. The gate didn't budge. From behind me, a golf cart hummed up. 3 people sat inside, all wearing matching navy blazers with HOA emblems. The woman in front, with hair like polished straw and sunglasses that never moved, looked me over like I was litter on her sidewalk. "You lost, sir?" she asked. "This property isn't open to the public." "I'm Elijah Booker," I said evenly, "and that house belonged to my father before me. I came home." They laughed. One man nudged the other and muttered, "He thinks this is his mansion." Their laughter echoed down the quiet road. I didn't argue. I just opened my notebook, scribbled the date and their names from their tags, then reached beneath my shirt and pulled out the old brass key on a leather cord. Their laughter stopped when they saw it. A white tent bloomed on the front lawn like a parasitate's sharp corners, champagne tables, and crisp brochures all screaming luxury. I stood just outside the fence line, a few feet from the private viewing for investors only sign. My boots sank slightly into the soft grass as I watched them parade through my land. A woman in high heels clicked past me, holding a brochure with a golden heading, "The Future of Pine Valley. Modern Elegance Meets Untapped Opportunity." They had renamed my grandfather's house, Lot 17. A voice rang out near the porch. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cheryl Lancaster, president of the HOA, and the visionary behind this redevelopment." She emerged from the house like a stage actress doll, composed. Dressed in a tailored black vest suit, lips painted a shade colder than her eyes. When she saw me, her smile vanished. She stepped off the porch and walked toward the fence with sharp steps. "You again," she said. "We've already filed the paperwork. You have no legal claim here." "I never sold this property," I replied, calm. "It's still in my family trust." Her voice dropped, venom hidden behind polish. "Step off this land, Mr. Booker, or we'll have you removed. Trespassing is a serious offense." I didn't respond. I simply looked past her, watching as the real estate agent described my family's home as a prime teardown and an opportunity to erase the outdated and embrace the new. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase the history that lived inside it. I sent the letter by certified mail, just as I had 100 others in my legal career, clear, concise, and sharp as a nail. To the Pine Valley OA. I, Elijah Booker, am the lawful trustee and inheritor of the Booker estate at 421 Booker Lane. This home has remained in my family since 1908 and is under legal protection as a historical landmark, as registered with the State Heritage Council. Attached are the original deed, preservation certification, and trust documents. A week later, I received their response 2-page rejection printed on thick white stock with their blue HOA emblem at the top. "Mr. Booker, thank you for your correspondence. After internal review, we find no current documentation in county records verifying your ownership or your claims of historic protection. As such, the Pine Valley HOA will proceed with development plans as scheduled. Please refrain from further disruptions or unauthorized presence on HOA property." They used the phrase unauthorized presence like I was a squatter on my own bloodline. I read it twice, then let out a quiet chuckle. That night, I went into the back closet of the cottage I was renting and retrieved the old leather briefcase scratched, heavy, and untouched for years. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were the original documents, deed papers, trust registration, and a notarized preservation agreement dated June 11, 1985. On the bottom of that document was a signature that had once silenced rooms. Thaddeus A. Booker. Federal Judge, U.S. Circuit Court, retired. My father. He didn't just pass down a house, he passed down legacy and legal armor. I placed the file on the table and stared at it for a long while, remembering the summers he made me study case law before letting me run through the trees behind that house. He used to say, "One day someone will try to take what's yours, son. Don't let them. But don't shout. Show them the ink." The next morning, I walked into the County Heritage Office no as a complainant, but as a former colleague. Rachel Kim, now director, blinked when she saw me. Elijah, I thought you'd retired. I had, I said, handing her the file, but apparently, my house didn't. She flipped through the documents, her brow furrowing in recognition. This signature, Thaddeus Booker? My father. Rachel looked up. This is ironclad. Nobody in their right mind would ignore this. They're not in their right mind, they're in a rush to pave over the past. I told her everything, how the HOA dismissed my claim, how they treated me like a trespasser. I also told her what I hadn't told anyone in over a decade, that before I retired, I had served as senior legal advisor for the State Heritage Council, overseeing land trust certifications and preservation disputes just like this one. I helped write the very laws they were now pretending didn't exist. Rachel's voice softened. You going public? No, I said. Not yet. I'm just giving them a chance to read. And this time, I'd make sure the envelope couldn't be ignored. They dressed it up like a celebration. The lawn was trimmed to perfection, the hedges shaped like wine glasses, and a red carpet was rolled out from the front steps of my grandfather's home to a row of luxury cars. Strings of soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Pine Valley HOA had spared no expense. Beneath a massive tent, investors sipped champagne and nibbled on cheese they couldn't pronounce. A woman with a headset narrated the auction with theatrical charm, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime acquisition and praising the modern potential of a neglected historic asset. Neglected. That word made my jaw tighten. I stood beyond the hedge line, just far enough to avoid security, but close enough to hear everything. Elijah Booker, 78 years old, wearing a tan windbreaker and scuffed leather shoes, wasn't invited. But I was watching. Cheryl Lancaster stood center stage, black suit pressed so stiff it looked like it could cut glass. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, and she held the microphone like a queen making declarations. This property, she declared, has been freed from disuse. It's time to bring it into the 21st century. The crowd applauded politely. A man in a navy suit raised a paddle. 3.6 million, he said. Another countered, 3.8. The numbers climbed. 4 million. 4.2. The crowd was thin, but the bidders were real. When it hit 5 million, the woman at the podium smiled wide. Sold, pending signature and final processing. The winner, a tech executive from Austin, walked up to the makeshift signing table with a confident stride, surrounded by 2 assistants and a phone to his ear. Then the silence fell. 3 unmarked black sedans pulled onto the gravel drive. Doors opened, and 3 individuals stepped out, 2 men in suits, and 1 woman in a dark green coat with a gold badge clipped to her collar. They didn't run, they walked, calm, purposeful. The woman approached the signing table, held up a document, and announced loudly enough for the whole crowd to hear, by order of the State Attorney General's office. All transactions relating to parcel 421 Booker Lane are hereby suspended pending investigation. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The auctioneer's smile cracked. The tech exec paused mid-signature. Cheryl's face froze. The woman in the coat continued. This property is under a preservation deed filed in 1985, legally binding and registered with the State Heritage Council. Any attempt to transfer ownership without approval from the listed trustee is unlawful under state code. The auction collapsed in seconds. Cameras turned off. The cheese trays were suddenly forgotten. But it wasn't over. Cheryl Lancaster, the man beside the agent, called, "Please step forward." She blinked, trying to maintain composure. "What is this?" "You're being served notice of investigation into allegations of fraudulent documentation, unlawful property transfer, and falsification of ownership records." "I was told," she started, but her voice faltered. "No court has granted you authority to claim or sell this property," the agent continued. "And you submitted forged documentation to justify this auction." I stepped out from the shadows, then not to gloat, just to witness. Cheryl saw me, her lips tightened. "You did this," she hissed. I met her eyes. "No, you did this when you ignored the law." She tried to speak, but the legal representative was already motioning her aside. "Ma'am, we'll need your cooperation. Please come with us." In front of investors, residents, and her board, Cheryl Lancaster was escorted off the property. No handcuffs, not yet. But the fall had begun. As I walked away, someone from the crowd called after me, not with malice, but with curiosity. "Wait, who are you?" I didn't stop walking. I just answered loud enough for them to hear. "I'm the man who still holds the key." The morning after the auction collapsed, I met with my attorney at a quiet office above a bakery downtown. Lucian Grant didn't dress like a fighter, no flashy suit or courtroom swagger. But behind his reading glasses and soft voice was a mind sharper than most blades I'd known. He didn't ask why I was there. He just motioned me in and said, "Tell me everything." I laid out the documents: deed, preservation orders, my father's notarized signature, the rejection letter from the HOA, and a copy of the auction flyer with Cheryl's signature at the bottom. Lucian flipped through the files silently. Then he sat back in his chair. "You've been preparing for this?" I nodded. "For a year and a half." He raised an eyebrow. "You knew they'd try something?" "I didn't know when," I said. "But people like her don't respect history. And they never check the second page of anything." He smiled, just a little. "Then we're not just filing a complaint. We're going to court." Within 48 hours, Lucian filed a multi-count civil suit against the Pine Valley HOA and Cheryl Lancaster in her personal capacity. The charges were severe: fraudulent representation of property ownership, intentional misrepresentation of zoning records, destruction and attempted sale of federally registered historic property, personal liability for defamation of trust and unauthorized auctioneering. But Lucian didn't stop there. He held a press briefing on the courthouse steps, not for drama, but to set the record straight. Reporters jostled for microphones as he held up a certified document stamped with the federal emblem. "This," he said, "is a record from the National Registry of Historic Properties. It confirms that 421 Booker Lane has been under federal heritage protection since 1985. Through a petition co-signed by one Elijah Booker, also listed as co-founder of the Heritage Equity Land Trust, a non-profit responsible for preserving historically black-owned estates in the southern region." The cameras flashed. "And," Lucian added, turning to a second folder, "this is a notarized letter from the Preservation Council acknowledging a breach of federal protection statutes. That means this isn't just a civil case anymore, it's about violating national trust." I watched from behind the press line, calm, collected. Every step they'd taken, every fence, every notice, every laugh had brought them closer to this exact moment. Because what Cheryl didn't know, what no one in that neighborhood ever bothered to ask, was that I'd never come back unarmed. My family didn't leave legacies without safeguards. 2 years ago, after receiving whispers that Pine Valley HOA had been harassing longtime residents for aesthetic violations, I began documenting every letter, every name, every zoning error they made. I updated the registry. I filed renewals of our trust protections. I hired a forensic auditor to trace HOA spending. I even notified the state attorney's office in advance, laying the groundwork for what I knew would come. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I knew they'd test the fence and I wanted it electrified when they did. By the end of the week, Cheryl had retained legal counsel of her own. They attempted to file a counterclaim asserting administrative error and denying intent. The judge didn't even entertain it. The HOA board began to fracture. Half wanted her gone. The other half were too afraid of what might surface if they pressed further. Meanwhile, the news caught fire. Black retiree sues HOA over mansion land grab. Historic estate nearly sold in illegal auction. Federal heritage laws invoked in local HOA scandal. Lucian leaned over his desk and said, "They thought you were just some old man with memories." I looked at him and replied, "They saw the age in my face, but missed the law in my blood. Because I didn't just inherit that house. I built the legal trap they walked into. And now, it was snapping shut. It didn't happen all at once, but the queen did fall." On a gray Thursday morning, Cheryl Lancaster was led out of her home in handcuffs. She wore the same black suit she had flaunted at the auction, but this time, no spotlight followed heralding the flash of news cameras and the cold hush of neighbors watching from behind drawn curtains. The charges read aloud were swift and severe. fraudulent misrepresentation of property ownership, falsification of public records, unauthorized use of HOA funds, attempted unlawful sale of a federally protected site. And that was just the beginning. Her mugshot hit the local paper before noon. The headline read, "OA President Sells 1B Mansion, Triggers Federal Investigation." I clipped it and tucked it into my folder, next to the preservation deed and my father's signature. Not for gloating, for record-keeping. What came next was not legal, it was human. By the weekend, the HOA boardroom became a war zone. Members turned on each other. Vice President Dana Whitmore resigned with a one-line email. I had no knowledge of Cheryl's actions. Treasurer Rob Keane followed, citing stress-related health concerns. Others didn't resign. They simply vanished. At a hastily organized emergency meeting, the seats around the long polished table were half empty. For the first time, the room had no refreshments. No catered lunch, no arrogant smiles, just silence and the weight of consequence. And then came the residents. They weren't yelling, they were remembering. A mother stood up, holding a binder full of letters. "Cheryl fined me, $400 for hanging a baby swing on my porch. Said it didn't match community aesthetics." A retired veteran raised his hand. "She denied my request to install a wheelchair ramp. Said it would bring down the visual harmony." A nurse, voice trembling, told them, "I was deployed during hurricane season. Came home to a foreclosure notice over 85 in late dues." One by one, the voices came. People who had been fined, silenced, humiliated not by the law, but by a woman who wore her authority like armor and used it like a weapon. I didn't speak. I simply stood in the back, just as I had at the auction, and let the truth speak louder than I ever could. By Monday, a petition circulated demanding a full audit of HOA activities. Hundreds of residents signed. The state appointed a temporary oversight committee to begin reviewing every enforcement action taken in the last 5 years. Lucian, my attorney, was contacted by several residents who now wanted to join the civil case. The number grew from a dozen to more than 50. Class action status was pending. The news cycle didn't let go. National outlets picked it up. Retired black lawyer defends family legacy, exposes HOA corruption. Luxury HOA in legal freefall after illegal auction. Mansion masseuse becomes model case for HOA abuse reform. A CNN anchor even referred to Cheryl as the Queen of Control. That nickname stuck, but not how she would have wanted. The press had a field day when the investigation expanded. The Public Integrity Bureau released a statement. "We have reason to believe the HOA president acted with full knowledge of the property's protected status. We are also investigating whether funds were funneled into unauthorized personal accounts or third-party shell entities." It turned out, Cheryl had approved multiple projects, landscaping upgrades, security patrols, even holiday decorations without board votes, using HOA funds like a personal bank. And it was all documented. My quiet submission of evidence had triggered not just a criminal inquiry, but a cultural reckoning. People started knocking on my door not out of curiosity, but out of apology. A teenage boy from the neighborhood came with a potted plant. "My mom said you used to live here. I'm sorry they took it from you." An older woman offered pie and said, "I thought you were just some angry man with a grudge. I was wrong." Even the mailman lingered one afternoon, tipped his cap and said, "Glad you're back, Mr. Booker. This place feels right again." But the most unexpected moment came at the next HOA town hall meeting. It was standing room only. Cheryl's seat sat empty, a quiet symbol of the power that had collapsed. The interim chair, a soft-spoken woman named Marlene, stood behind the podium and read a prepared statement. "We, the acting board members of Pine Valley HOA, acknowledge that grievous errors were made under the previous leadership. We extend our full cooperation to state and federal investigators, and will support efforts to restore trust, accountability, and fairness to this community." Then she looked up and added, unscripted, "We forgot what this place was built on: neighbors, not rules, history, not aesthetics, people, not power." The room was silent. Then came applause, not explosive, just steady, like rain finally breaking a long drought. Outside the clubhouse, as I passed the flagpole, I noticed someone had tied a ribbon around it. Deep gold, the color of old justice. I didn't stop walking. Because Cheryl may have worn a crown of authority, but now everyone could see it was made of rusted tin. And as she sat in a cell, far from the mansion she tried to steal, the rest of us began something far greater than revenge. We began to rebuild. The invitation came on thick cream paper, folded neatly, hand-delivered by a boy no older than 10. "Mr. Booker," he said, a little nervous. "They want you to speak at the community gathering. Mama says it's important." I nodded, took the envelope, and gently ruffled the boy's hair. "Tell your mama I'll be there." That Sunday evening, the new HOA board held its first town hall since the scandal unraveled, but this one didn't take place inside the clubhouse. It was held on the lawn under open sky, folding chairs set in rows, fairy lights strung between oak trees, and no podium in sight. The neighborhood had changed. So had the tone. No banners, no branded coffee mugs, just people black, white, Latino, Asian neighbors who finally saw each other beyond HOA rules and landscaping citations. Marlene opened the evening with a few words, her voice steady. "We know we can't undo what was done, but we can listen, and tonight there's one voice we owe that to more than anyone." She turned toward me and nodded. "Mr. Elijah Booker." I walked slowly to the small wooden platform they'd built in the middle of the grass. My knees weren't what they used to be, but my back was straight. I wasn't here to demand anything. I came to remind them of what they almost forgot. I cleared my throat and looked around at the faces, many of them embarrassed, others curious, some simply waiting. "I'm not here to shame anyone," I began, "because shame only sticks to those willing to carry it, and what this community needs more than guilt is memory." I paused and looked toward the old house, still standing proud at the end of Booker Lane. That home behind me was built by my grandfather with his bare hands. He was a Pullman porter who saved every penny to buy this land, not because it was big or fancy, but because it was safe. I saw some eyebrows rise. During the 1960s, this home served as a shelter. Not just for our family, but for strangers running from fire hoses, dogs, and angry mobs. It was never just a house. It was a place of refuge for folks with nowhere else to go. I watched a hush fall over the crowd. Even the restless children quieted. This land wasn't landscaped for beauty. It was carved out for survival, and the people who built it weren't asking for power, just peace. I held up a faded black and white photo of me, father and grandfather, standing in front of the porch, tools in hand. They didn't wear suits, they didn't sit on boards, but they had dignity, the kind that doesn't shout but stays. Through fire, through loss, through the kind of silence that tries to erase you. My voice softened. "See, not everyone who's poor is without worth. But everyone who loses their conscience?" I let the pause stretch. "They lose everything that matters." I let that line settle like dust on the grass. In recent months, we've seen how greed dresses itself in rules, how control hides behind titles. But dignity? I looked around again. Dignity doesn't need a title. It shows up when you treat others with respect, especially when no one's watching. Marlene wiped her eyes. A few others nodded slowly. "And now that the house is still standing, I want one thing. Not revenge, not special treatment, just a promise." I pointed to the children sitting on picnic blankets. "Make sure they don't have to fight the same battles we did. Teach them what this place really means. Not a collection of houses, but a home built on stories, not just stone." The applause was gentle at first. Then it swelled, not with fanfare, but with understanding. As I stepped down, a young couple stood to hug me. Then a veteran. Then a woman I remembered arguing against my presence just weeks ago. She handed me a plate of cornbread and simply said, "I'm sorry." I smiled. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe it to the history beneath your feet." That night, the sky over Pine Valley was clear. No sirens, no whispers of control. Just the sound of folding chairs, laughter, and a community slowly learning to be whole. Dignity had never left. It had just been waiting for someone to speak its name. A year passed. The HOA that once ruled Pine Valley with an iron clipboard no longer existed. It had been dissolved, restructured, and rewritten from the ground up. But the real change wasn't in the bylaws, it was in the people. On a warm spring afternoon, the community gathered under the oaks near the front entrance. Children held balloons. Neighbors brought folding chairs and lemonade. No one wore suits. There were no speeches, no podiums. Just a quiet ceremony to mark a new chapter. At the heart of it stood a newly mounted brass plaque, polished and firm, fixed onto the restored front gate of the estate. The engraving read, "Booker Legacy Estate. Respect isn't given by title. It's earned by how you treat the ones you think are beneath you." The crowd stood in silence for a moment, then erupted into soft, heartfelt applause. I didn't stand in the center. I watched from my porch, where I had always belonged. The wind carried the sounds of children laughing. A little girl raced down the gravel path, barefoot and free. A boy followed her, shouting about frogs and forts. No one yelled at them. No one fined their parents. I took a sip of sweet tea and leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking beneath me like an old friend. Then I looked at the gate, the plaque that would outlast all of us. And I whispered, not to anyone in particular. They tried to erase my name, now it's carved in stone.